that's weird. Alright. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't know if any other streamer has done this. I would assume that there's been streamers who have done this, but I don't really watch that many streams, so. Especially ones who would do a book, like a top 10 book review thing. But yeah, so we're going to do my top 10 favorite books. I'm going to talk about them, tell you why I like them, kind of give you a little bit what they're about, tell you what I think the meaning behind them is, and yeah, we'll maybe look into the history of the biography of the authors. One sec. All right. Here. I'm gonna turn this way down, and that way we have a little bit of background music. Yeah. So, I am doing a top 10 book review, I guess. Just about my favorite books. I have some of my favorite books aren't in here because I wanted to have the hard copies of all of the ones that I was gonna do. So there's a few that are missing that would have been in this list but aren't. Like Fight Club and Clockwork Orange would have been in there. Another one was Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. That one would have been in there too, but I wanted to have the hard copy of the book, and all of those I lent out to people, so I don't have the hard copy of them. But there's other ones that were more like philosophy-based books and like political ideology books, but which is like mainly what I read. But I wanted to keep it to like just like straight narrative-based books mainly. There's only one in there that's not really doesn't really have that much of a narrative. Maybe two, but yeah. So those two would be Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley and Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, but I just really like those two books, so I wanted to put them in there. And I felt like it gave a little bit of a variety in books. So the first one we're gonna start out with is The Wolf of Wall Street by Jordan Belfort. It's not really that much of a deep book at all. It's just really fun, you know. there's a lot more in this book than what was in the movie. If you ever watched the movie's really good too. It's directed by Martin Scorsese. I would suggest if you don't read, actually, to go and watch the movie. It's a fun movie. This book is really fun too. Like the whole time, you're just gonna laugh the whole time reading it. The way he describes things, and just it's really well written too. Like for his first book, and him just being a degenerate, like Wall Street artist. I mean, not artist. Wall Street, like broker. He really is a good writer, which is surprising. But yeah, there's not much to say about this book. There's some really funny parts in here. There's some stuff that are different from the book and the movie. Like the scene where he's on the boat, that doesn't happen in the book. The scene on the boat where he's like, these are fun coupons, you know, that doesn't happen in the book. Also in the movie, it doesn't really show how bad his drug addiction actually was. Like in this, it talks about some crazy stuff that happened to him where he was like hallucinating, basically. Like there's one part in the book where he like loses a rock of coke, and he thinks that he loses a rock of coke at least, and he starts like stabbing his couch, like all the cushions in his couch, and starts ripping them open looking for the rock, and he doesn't find it, and then he sees some guy pop out of the TV, so he throws a knife. I'm fairly sure he throws a knife. He throws something at the TV, and it just shatters the fucking TV. And so it doesn't really, the movie doesn't get into how bad of a drug problem he really had. But yeah, and then it ends with him getting arrested and having to go to into like rehab, and then he went to prison. And actually, the way that the reason why he wrote this book was because he was cellmates with Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, you know? Here, one sec, I'll pull up Tommy Chong so you can put a face to the name. I assume you probably know who Tommy Chong is. Yeah, Tommy Chong. Right there. Yeah. But he was actually cellmates with him, and he was telling Tommy Chong all of his stories. And Tommy Chong was like, man, you gotta write a book about this. This is awesome. This is crazy. So he decided to start writing the book, and he started writing the book in prison, I'm fairly sure. Here, let's look up a video of Jordan Belfort. Of Jordan Belfort talking about how Tommy Chong actually.
You remember the Wolf on Wall Street movie? That Beltfort guy? Well, you can't make it up. And they left this out of the movie. They don't understand why they left this out of the movie.
For real, they should have put that into the movie.
Prison was Tommy Chong was in there for drug paraphernalia and other items involving marijuana. Yeah. They were bunk mates. Mm-hmm. God, that should have been in there. Hey, man.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't put that into the movie. Because that would have been kind of funny, having Tommy Chong at the end of the movie telling him that he should write a book about it. That would have been funny. But yeah, so this is a whole ass interview. I don't know if we'll see if it's like labeled, and maybe they talk about it. Maybe right here.
Yeah, totally. Man, I
love
remember
Tommy Chong's
Woody
voice.
Allen was writing scripts on an old typewriter, and he used to take pride in it. You know, he would say, yeah, I still write my scripts on an old typewriter. Now, is he still doing that?
I doubt it.
I doubt it, too. Someone finally said, hey, Woody, here's a computer. It's easy. It's the same thing as a typewriter, except it's easier. See, don't get...
Tommy Chong and Jordan Belfort talking about them being in prison together. Let's see if it's on YouTube right here. Here. Yeah, here's Jordan
PrEP
Belfort
services for
talking about
HIV prevention are available at Butte Family Planning. Call us today.
This is on the Nelk podcast. That's funny.
Earth.
I'll have to watch their
origin.
podcast
Was jail
with Jordan
fucked?
Belfort.
Or
No, it wasn't that bad. Listen, I
He
wasn't
went
getting
into a
butt
white
fucked by
collar
Bubba
jail,
in jail.
so-
You know, I was in a minimum security prison camp. You know, it wasn't the worst place, though, but jail's jail.
Oh
It sucked.
man, this must be a really old one because what's his name? It's still is
But my
still on the
bunkmate was
podcast.
Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong.
oh wow.
Yeah, it
What a fucking sell that must have been.
was great, by the way. It
That
was
would have been
hysterical.
so crazy.
That's how I started
being,
writing. I tell
bunkmates with Tommy
Tommy
Chong.
stories at night, and he's just rolling on the floor. And then the third night, he's like, dude, I thought you were making this shit up. My wife Googled you. It's all true. He goes, you got to write a book. I'm like, really? Like, I didn't think my life was that crazy because it's like, did you think when it was your life? You don't think your life is. He's like, your life. I don't know. Really? You think my life's
just
interesting?
happens.
It's like my life. I don't know if it's that interesting. It's, you know, it's wild, but he's like, dude, I'm Tommy Chong. I think your life is fucking crazy. You got to write a book. So that's
For
how I
real,
started
if
writing.
Tommy
But you know,
Chong
other than
thinks
that,
that your
jail was
life is
very
wild,
for
your life is
me.
probably pretty fucking
I had it
awesome.
about as
Or
good as
not
you can
awesome,
have
but
it.
crazy.
Yeah.
But jail sucks. I mean, it's still. I don't want to glamorize it in the sense that I wasn't happy to be there, but I certainly made the most of it in the sense that I had I had people working for me in jail. Like, you know, you pay people to be a butler, a fucking cook, a valet,
Yeah.
and it's not expensive in there.
I
And
wonder
you're
how
helping
much-
everyone else out. But
'Cause
then
you
again,
you gotta be.
I wonder how much money Jordan Belfort had after he was charged with all those charges, because I would assume that they seized a lot of his money, you know? So I wonder how much money he had after he got charged. I don't know.
Be rolling there like that. You got money. So I mean,
yeah, but
that's
like, just so you know, it doesn't take a lot of money to roll big in jail. Like, if you have like $300 a month, you're rolling big in jail. It's not like, you get it. It's not like that, you know.
And
The
do you
better
pay
part
them
was-
like outside the jail or like inside? Like, does it go to their money outside the jail?
There's multiple ways. You know, sometimes you do it by just giving them stamps in jail. You can have, you know, your friend, which is dangerous. Why Steve Madden got in trouble for this. So Steve Madden did extra time in jail because, like, for some stupid thing, like his assistant sent someone else in the jail money. You get it? And they got caught, and he did an extra 6, like, so fucking stupid. Like, he was just being generous. Like, some guy had no money, and he's like, oh, yeah, whatever, I'll give you a few $100,000.
Madden.
His assistant sends someone else money, and he had
Is Steve Madden's the one who had a shoe company, right? Steve Madden. Yeah, Steve Madden's a shoe company that they used to defraud a bunch of investors and stuff.
doing 6 months extra.
so they tack on a lot of time for the small shit. In there,
Small
right?
shit.
They can do
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
They just tack on fucking
Yeah.
6 months.
Well, I think with Steve Mark, he didn't give him extra time. He didn't get extra time. He didn't get his deduction for good time and for going through what's called the drug program. It's something called RDAP, the Residential Drug Treatment Program. So what happens is when you go to jail and you're an ex-addict, you can say, well, I was, doing what I did cause of drugs. So they'll let you go through a program and they'll reduce your sentence by 18 months. So I got sentenced to 4 years and did only 22 months, partially because of good time, good behavior, partially because of this RDAP program. Everybody goes through it, right? Everyone's suddenly a drug addict, right? I really was, right? But a lot of people just say, oh, yeah, I'm a drug addict. They go through the program, get time off.
When you went to jail, how much did you have going into jail? And then when you came out, how much were you left with?
I had about maybe $500,000 to $1 million going in and zero coming out.
So you had to
Okay.
start fresh.
Start
didn't-
fresh. And I was so fucking
didn't know
happy
how
to start
much
fresh.
you
I got to
had.
tell you, it was, looking
Glad
back
that I
at it,
actually
there was
got that
something
question answered.
amazing about starting over, and it's, and I probably wasn't thinking that at the moment.
It is impressive that he was able to build that empire, even though he was cheating and defrauding people, And then afterwards, he had nothing, got back out of jail, and then wrote a book. What was a best-selling book, and then now he's a multimillionaire again.
Moment, but looking back at it, it was an amazing journey to go from zero to where I am today again. It was just incredible. And it was like, there was a lot of tough times early on. Like, for example, shortly after I wrote the book, The Wolf of Wall Street, the global financial crisis hit. And money became impossible to get. The book became a huge success, my first book. And then I was writing a second book, which I'd already sold $1 million, maybe maybe 900,000. And then I was about to write a third book, and suddenly the price $50,000. The money just dried up, and I had no money.
What was your highest net worth at one point?
Oh, what the?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's probably close to. I mean,
Fuck out.
if you take the stock of Steve Madden, in excess of $1 billion. Yeah. Because Steve, when you look at Steve
so
Madden,
he
staying
had,
85% at one
He
point,
shouldn't have
and then
had
fully diluted.
He shouldn't have had stock in Steve Madden because he was the person who broke the stock, and so they pushed that stock onto a bunch of people saying buy this stock, buy this stock. So it boosted the price of the stock, and then and he had a bunch of money in that stock, but in a different person's name, I'm pretty sure.
Probably even after the offers, I own 25%. It's worth $6 billion now. So hundreds and hundreds, if not $1 billion.
That's fucking
Huge
insane.
money.
Yeah, I went to jail for a day, and it was enough.
Well,
Enough
that's
to
different,
realize
though.
I don't want
That's
to
not jail. That's
I've been to jail.
that's jail, not
For
prison.
4
Is it
days.
different? That's a local for what?
It was
DWI or what?
Nah, we did a fake security. I did once.
Oh, I
in
remember that.
Canada.
I remember that thing. What was that
A fake security prank. So we dressed up as
Alright.
Paul.
Well, they're not really talking that much about Tommy Chong. So, all right, let's go back. Oh. All right, here we go. All right, and now the second book that I have. This one actually is a lot more of a deep book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's about So there's 2 parts of the book. The first part of the book is about his experience in the Holocaust. What about one ball? That was from last night, all those comments. He was watching my stream. But yeah, so this is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and the first part describes his experience in the concentration camps because he was a Jew. And then the second part of the book is about his the logotherapy that he came up with, which is basically... Yeah, that was one ball. It was last night's stream. But so his logotherapy is basically about how people need to find meaning in their life, and it talks about how even through suffering you can find meaning because it can build your character, basically. So even in suffering, you should be able to find meaning through that if there's no other route. And he said that there's 2 other ways of finding meaning. I think that there's more than that. I think that the biggest way to find meaning in life is through God and through the Bible, in my opinion, but he talks about through like setting a path like of goals, that's a good way to find meaning, like setting up a business, having goals in your life and striving towards those goals is a way to find meaning. And then another one is through love, like loving another person is one of the other ways that you can find meaning in life. And in the book, it talks about how the people who died in the concentration camps were the ones who lost meaning in life. And like there was one story that I remember. I haven't read this book in in probably like 4 or 5, no, longer than that, probably 6 years. So I should have really skimmed through this book, but I didn't get the time to skim through it that much. But one story I remember was there was this one guy who thought that they were going to get out and be liberated at a certain date. And so he was hyped about that date coming. And then once the date passed, he became very sick and eventually died. And so from that, he kind of discovered that through hope and meaning that you will be able to survive and you can push through. All right, now let's get to the next book. This is John Milton's Paradise Lost. And this is it's a poem. It's epic poem, like how the Greek epics were written, but this was written in the 1600s, I'm fairly sure. And it's I'm gonna turn this down. It's too upbeat for me right now. And a lot of people, I think, misread the book because there's a lot of people who use quotes from the book. They might not even know that they're quoting the book. Like, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. That's a quote straight from this book that the devil says, and a lot of people who are like atheists and hate religion and stuff use that quote without knowing that this was a book that was made by a Christian. He was a Protestant Christian, and the book is basically about it's about how God sent Satan down, cast Satan out of heaven into hell, and they build up a kingdom in hell that they call Pandemonium, and that's actually where the word pandemonium comes from, is from this book. And I don't think people know that really know that either. But and then he has spite towards God, and he knows that he can't defeat God directly, so he goes after the new creation that he had just made, that God had just made, which is us humans, and he tainted humans by making them eat the forbidden fruit, the fruit of knowledge. And there's some weird stuff in the book, like there's one part where he disguises himself as a frog and sneaks into where Adam and Eve are sleeping. And he starts just whispering in Eve's ear about how she needs to eat the apple and everything. And then the other angels come down and see him there and kick the frog out. I don't think that they even knew that it was Satan. And then what was I gonna say? And then she wakes up the next morning and starts crying and tells Adam about a dream that she had where an angel, a really beautiful angel, was telling her to eat the fruit of knowledge. And he's like, don't worry, it's just a dream. And then it's a pretty interesting book. There's actually a second book to this. What is that book called? 1 second. I think it's called Paradise Regained. I haven't read it. I haven't read that one. Yeah, it's called Paradise Regained, the second book in this. And that one's about the devil trying to tempt Satan, which I haven't read that one, but. Okay. Like 10. Yeah. Nice. Well. Maybe only 5 then. Yeah, and then I don't know. We'll go buy Quaid's birthday present and then we'll figure out.
So you have to quit streaming before.
Yeah, I was planning on it.
Okay.
That's why I started so early.
Okay.
And then
Just give me your phone. I can do that down here. But I'm just can't tell you a secret of why I'm doing it. And then it doesn't tip me.
Oh.
And it doesn't tip me anything.
So she sees that
Yeah,
you're.
she stalks me because I'll ignore her
Yeah.
messages. And she stalks me when I'm at work to come get free stuff.
I don't even know how to do it.
That's why I was like, I'll do it.
All right. Darn it! I lost viewers from that. Yeah, I had 5. Now I only have 2 again. What? On Kick. I have 1 viewer on YouTube, and then 2 on Kick right now. One of the ones that was on Kick though is me, because it helps boost. Yeah, so the Kick is just us 2 now. Yeah. On Kick. Yeah. All right. Yeah, so a lot of people misread this and think that Satan is the good guy of the story, which I just think is a very stupid reading of the book, because the good guy would not go and try to get an innocent being to be cast to hell just because he is like jealous or spiteful towards God. That's obviously a bad character. And just because they humanize Satan by like trying to, I feel like this whole book is John Milton trying to understand Satan. And a lot of people think that since he isn't just like an evil like person just to be evil, that he has like emotions and stuff, that they think that he's a good guy for some reason. And it doesn't make any sense. I feel like you have to be kind of a very sad person if you read this book and you think that Satan is the good guy, you know? Like, you have to be a very sad and spiteful person, in my opinion. Alright. If you want like a more in-depth video explaining Paradise Lost, I would say to go watch Wendigoon's video on it if you don't want to actually read the book, because he has a very good video about the book. Alright, next one. This is Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley is the author who wrote what's it called? He wrote Brave New World, which is a really good novel about like a dystopian future novel. I would say that you should read that book if you want to get into like a dystopian novel, because it's way closer to what we have nowadays than any other book that I've ever read. Like any of George Orwell's books about like 1984 and stuff, that's not really what we live in. We live in something that's way closer to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. But anyways, enough about Brave New World. Here, one second. I want to keep it on there so that I can see how far behind my screen is. You know how I noticed that? Because I saw one of my viewers drop down. I noticed that you probably weren't doing it. But isn't that funny that they were bunkmates? And the only reason why he wrote the book was because he was telling Tommy Chong like his stories. I already did. But I met Tommy Chong. It's like, well, you should definitely write a book about this. Watching the stream last night. behind me like that. I guess I can see you, though. Quit it. You distracted me. Alright, where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about Aldous Huxley. But anyways, where was I? This book is about how Aldous Huxley actually did mescaline in a research experiment about the effects of mescaline. And I don't know, there's not really much I can say about it except for that it was... Get out of here. There's not really much I can say about it except for that it's just a really interesting book. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a book. It's more of like an essay. It's only like 60 pages long. You can read it in like an hour or two if you want to. If you're a really fast reader, you could probably read it in like 30 minutes, but I'm not that fast of a reader, so. But yeah, it just talks about his experience on mescaline. Well, there's 3 parts. There's first part is his experience on mescaline. And then the second part is about like the history of like cultures using mescaline. Yeah. And then the last part is about like how he thinks we can use mescaline going further on in the future. Yeah, that's basically what it is. The best part is definitely the first part where he talks about his experience on mescaline, because it's just, there's some parts that I was like, what? That shit's fucking crazy. But he took a voice recorder when he was on mescaline, and he would talk into it and talk about the experience that he had on mescaline. So he could remember what to write about. Yeah, it's just a really good book. It's interesting. It's fun, kind of fun to read too. And yeah. All right, now to the next book that we have here. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. This was one of my favorite books for a really long time. Like, it's a really fun book to read. It's just, there's some stuff in here that's just fucking crazy and outlandish. Like how he described some of his trips is funny. I love the way that Hunter S. Thompson writes too. It sounds like a really smart degenerate talking, which he was, but also the book is just really cool. Like the pictures in the book are awesome. I really like the art that's in the book. I'll find one that I really like in here. Like this picture right here. You see. And then there's a few pages that when I first came across it, I was so confused because look at this. It just has like an ink blotch on it for no reason. I think he just thought it was cool. But I thought that that someone got ink on the book, because I usually buy my books from thriftbook.com, so they're already pre-used, you know? But then I looked at it more and I was like, no, this was just put into the book for like aesthetic reasons. But anyways, the book is about Hunter S. Thompson, but he doesn't use his real name. He uses the name Raoul Duke, and because he was afraid that it would get him in trouble. And it's about him and his lawyer, Dr. Gonzo. And I don't even know if Dr. Gonzo is a real person or if it's just like another version of him, because there's no actual evidence throughout Hunter S. Thompson's life that Dr. Gonzo was a person in his life. So I don't know. But anyways, the book's about him and his lawyer going to Vegas to report on a motorcycle race called what was the motorcycle race called? The race that Hunter S. Thompson went to in Fear and Loathing. The Mint 400. It's called the Mint 400. And instead of going and reporting on the race, him and his lawyer decide to just go on like a drug-fueled like adventure in Las Vegas and try to find the American dream. And there's actually a really beautiful, beautifully written, I don't know what page it's on, like monologue where he talks about the American dream and the hippie culture of the 60s. I'll actually look that up. It's called The Wave Monologue. I'll look that up. It's in the movie, too. He actually reads it in the movie. He's like typing it when he's in Vegas. I'll actually play it for you. Because it really does show how good of a writer Hunter S. Thompson actually is. For being...
Strange memories.
Here, I'll play it for you guys. I wonder
Strange
where
memories on this nervous night in Las Vegas. Has it been 5 years? 6? It seems like a lifetime. The kind of peak.
I should have went through
never
this
comes
book
again.
and marked out where it was.
San Francisco in the middle 60s was a very special time and place to be a part of. But no explanation. No mix of words or music or memories can touch that sense of knowing that you were there and alive in that corner of time in the world. Whatever it meant. There was madness in any direction, at any hour. You could strike sparks anywhere. There was a fantastic universal sense that whatever we were doing was right, that we were winning. And that, I think, was the handle. That sense of inevitable victory over the forces of old and evil. Not in any mean or military sense. We didn't need that. Our energy would simply prevail. We had all the momentum. We were riding the crest of a high and beautiful wave. So now, less than 5 years later, you can go up on a steep hill in Las Vegas and look west. And with the right kind of eyes, you can almost see the high water mark. That place where the wave finally broke and rolled back.
See, he's a really good writer. Whoa. Okay, that was enough for that. But yeah, you can just tell from that monologue right there how good of a writer. Uh-oh. More info. Hopefully my stream doesn't get knocked down for that. I didn't even think about that might be a that might stop my stream. It doesn't look like it did, so we're good. Hopefully, I'll try to avoid that from now on. Oh. Yeah, I should have just looked it up and then read it to you. But I wanted to show the clip from the movie too, because the movie is really close to the book. Like, it's one of the books that I've read and the movies that I've watched where they're very similar, and there's not much missing from the so if you don't want to read the book, you can basically watch the movie, and the movie is almost exactly the same as the book, except for there's one part that I know is missing from the movie, and that is one sec. It's in the second part of the book. I'm fairly sure. It's really weird part of the book too. It's like, let me look for it. Man, I really should have went through and put bookmarks in the parts that I wanted to talk about. But anyways, the part of the book that's missing in the movie is actually in another movie about Hunter S. Thompson, where Hunter S. Thompson is played by what's his name? Why can't I think of the actor's name? Oh, he's a really good actor. Oh. Babe, what's the actor's name who's from Groundhog Day? What? Yeah, what's the actor's name from Groundhog Day? Bill Murray, yeah. Yeah, so there's another movie about Hunter S. Thompson that Hunter S. Thompson is played by Bill Murray. I think it's called like the Buffalo. It's fucking Bill Murray. Bill Murray. Where the Buffalo Roam. Yeah. And that's a really good movie if you ever want to watch that movie. But in this movie, it actually has the part that's missing from Fear and Loathing. And that part, it's really weird how it's written, because it says that the author just forgot the whole thing that happened, so he just wrote down the monologue of a voice recorder that he had on his chest when they went through a drive-through to get a burger from this woman. And it's funny. I'll play the... Where the Buffalo Roam. copy. Paste. Drive-through scene. Maybe it's not on here. But anyways, that's the scene that's missing in the movie that I know for sure is missing in the movie. And it's in this movie. So if you watch both of the movies, you can basically watch the whole book in its entirety. Like, even most of the monologues and everything that's in this book is in the movie. So if you aren't a big reader and you still want to know about this book, you can just watch the movie, basically. It's a really good movie. I watched the movie first before I read the book. And the first time I watched the movie, actually, I was on mushrooms. And it was a crazy-ass movie to watch. I don't do those anymore, but I used to. A lot of people probably think that this book, like, romanticizes drug use, but I don't think it really does. Because if you read the book, it really, there's a lot of parts that are very dark in it, you know? Like the part where Dr. Gonzo comes back and he brings, what the fuck is it called? It's the thing that the QAnon says they're extracting from children. Adrenochrome. He brings adrenochrome, and Hunter S. Thompson takes the adrenochrome, and that part is really fucked up. Like, how he describes his trip is so fucking crazy. It just seems it's fucked up. The people who believe that a bunch of elites are taking adrenochrome, though, are think that adrenochrome gives you youth. And in the book, it doesn't talk anything about that. It just says that it's a really psychoactive substance that's taken out of kids' brains. All right, now let's go on to the next book. This isn't really a book. It's a poem. You can read it in like 15 to 30 minutes. It's called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and it's by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. I really like this poem. It's my favorite poem. I actually found this poem because of a song that was made by Iron Maiden. It's a really long song. It's like a 15-minute long song. But and then I looked it up and found that it was based off of this poem. So I bought this book right here of the poem. It's really cool. It has a lot of interesting artwork in it. See that right there. And also Samuel Taylor's like life story is just really interesting too, because he had a opioid addiction, and he was raised he was raised a Christian and then kind of rejected Christianity in his youth, and he's one of the main people when you hear about the Romantics, like the Romantics poems and stuff. He's one of the main people who started it. They actually say that John Milton, Paradise Lost, was one of the first romantic poems ever written, but I don't think it really was. I think that this was one of the first. But it's not really how most romantic poems are. The poem is basically about old seaman who comes across three guys who are going to a wedding, and he tells them that he needs to tell them a story. So the two of the guys leave and go to the wedding, and one guy stays to listen to this old man's story. And he tells them a story about when he was on a ship that they were in a storm, and when the storm was happening, a bird came. I forget what the name of the bird was. It started with an A. Let me find it. Let me see if I can find what an albatross. They come across an albatross, or the albatross comes across them, and then brings the storm calm and makes it so that wind is pushing against their sails, and that they start going back to shore. And then the ancient mariner decides to shoot the bird with the crossbow. And the bird dies, falls on the deck, and everything basically goes to hell after that. The wind stops going, so they're stuck in the middle of the sea. All of them are starving, and one second, let me start playing the background music. I can't stand doing this without the background music. And anyways, they take the bird and put it around his neck. And then next what happens is all of his crew members start to die except for him. And then he sees a ghost ship, basically, and it says that he can see the ribs of the ship. So it's basically a ship that has no outside. It wouldn't be able to float. So he sees the ribs of the ship, and there's two people on the ship. There is death, that's a man, and then there's life in death, which is a woman. And they shoot dice for the mariner's soul. And life in death wins his soul. So then, after that, all of the men become alive again. All of the crew become alive again and start working the ship. And I think by life and death, they basically mean that he's gonna live forever, but wander the earth and have no meaning. Kind of like how the Bible says that Cain is cursed to be after he murdered Abel. And so anyways, then there becomes a storm happens again. They're working the ship, and then a three-headed serpent starts attacking the ship. And then he realizes that he needs to accept the beauty of the albatross. And then the albatross falls off of his neck. And I think that is him finding Christ again, because there's a lot of analogies towards Christianity. They use the number 3 a lot in the book. There's 7 parts to the poem. There's 7 parts to the poem, and there's just a lot of analogies towards Christianity in it. So I think that the whole book is talking about him rejecting Christ, then him going through hell, and then him finding Christ again. And then the end of the book is him basically ending the story and telling the man that he had to tell him the story because he felt that he had a penance, and he had to give penance to this man and tell the story, and he had this urge to always tell the story. And I think that that's why Samuel wrote this poem, was to tell the story of him coming back to Christ. But anyways, Samuel's life story is pretty cool too, because he was born a Christian, then he kind of went away from Christianity, got addicted to opioids, got addicted to opium, not like opioids that we have nowadays, but actual opium. And I'm pretty sure he got syphilis. I don't know for sure though. And then he came back to Christ though in the end of his life, and then he died not long after that. But it's just it's cool to relate the story of this poem back to his life, and that's why I kind of put this into my book list. All right, on to the next one. This is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is the author who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He writes a lot of fictional books that are based on Christianity, but this one is not fictional. This one is a lot of so he was actually given a part in the BBC broadcasting on the radio during World War II to talk about Christianity. And these are all a bunch of excerpts from his speeches they gave over the radio during World War II about Christianity. And he explains why Christianity is the one true religion. He does that through talking about how if there is morality, like true morality throughout civilizations, like to not kill, to not lie, then that morality has to come from something. And he thinks that he states that something is God. And so yeah, it's really interesting. You'd have to read it. I don't really feel like getting completely into it, but it's a good book to read, especially if you're newly coming into Christianity. I think you should read that book. All right, now on to my next book. Holy crap. This stream is going by pretty fast. I'm going to go smoke a cigar, and then I'll be back. All right. Yeah, I actually kind of want to watch a video about
Welcome to my channel. This is You on the Go. I want to talk about
Taylor's life.
Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Who was Samuel Coleridge Taylor? Well, he was a mixed race man, or mixed heritage man who lived here in England in the Victorian period. He lived here in England in the Victorian period. Yeah, he was born in 1875 and he died very young.
I was wondering. I was like, "There's no way that there was a picture of him. That must have just a random dude."
He became a great composer in that period of history. When I was in school here in England, when I went to school, school history didn't cover him at all. Even in music lessons, they didn't mention anything about this guy named Samuel Coleridge Taylor, even though I went to school in the same town that he grew up in. So I was living just a few miles from where his house was, but he wasn't told, history wasn't made known of him in this country here. But anyway, he was born from his mother was an English woman, and his father was from Sierra Leone. He came to England to study to be a physician. Anyway, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, from a very young age, his granddad, who he lived with, because his mother lived in the same house as her father, and his granddad, who was also of a musical background, and all of her family was very musical. They spotted he had some talent, and that's what he was known for. That's based off of a poem, and that's what made him really known. He was known in very high. He was held in very high esteem, to be invited by the president. His signature piece was Hiawatha, which is like composition that's based off of a poem.
I don't think that this is the same Samuel. This is Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Huh. What? Was there two? Because I don't think that he was a composer. And I also don't think that he was black. Maybe he was, but...
Biography of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, a leader of the British Romantic movement, was born on October 21, 1772 in Devonshire, England.
Here, let's watch this one.
Now, we're shaped by ideas, whether we're aware of them or not. And our culture owes an enormous debt to the Romantic period. I'll give you an example. If you walk into the streets,
I don't really like a lot of the Romantics.
Your overriding impression,
even though two of these books that are in here are people would call
most
Romantics.
Of those medieval buildings you will encounter are in fact products of Romanticism. So that's an instance, I think, of the way in which the very shape and structure of our environment has been deeply influenced by the Romantic tradition, by that Victorian Gothic. So to other factors, I might mention the revival of Shakespeare, wild gardens, or Chinese towers. You could also mention nationalism, folk traditions, or even ideas of personal fulfillment and conceptions
This
of the
guy
artist.
is very
All kinds
boring.
of ways in which Romanticism has deeply influenced our culture today. So obviously, Romanticism is very important, but it's also a period which is not terribly fashionable in contemporary intellectual culture. So to disparage a thinker as a romantic is a very effective form of polemic. And in fact, one might note here the curious status of figures like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, who are clearly late romantics, Christian romantics,
Yeah.
but romantics all the same, and that they inhabit a curious realm
Holy cow.
of
I guess
being
that a
both
lot of my books
enormously
here
powerful
romantics.
and successful
I guess this wouldn't be
writers,
considered a romantic,
and yet
but it
regarded
it's
with
written
a
by
curious
who?
disdain by many sophisticated critics of that sort of late romanticism. So I think our relationship to the romantic inheritance is a rather ambivalent one. On the one hand, we recognize that this is enormously important, and yet on the other hand, it wasn't so long ago before the Victorian society became particularly powerful that we were very keen to knock down Victorian buildings and intellectually rid ourselves of the Victorian and Romantic legacy. Okay, so how do I define Romanticism? Well, I'm thinking of Romanticism basically in terms of the period about 1770 to about 1870. And of course, the key event is that of the French Revolution, 1789.
Yeah.
Bliss it was that dawn to be a...
So that's why I think that the French Revolution was a terrible thing that happened. I think that it was, I don't know. It was just really unjustified and evil, in my opinion, just lopping off people's heads. But
alive.
So actually, this book, John Milton's Paradise Lost, they say was one of the main things that inspired a lot of people to do the French Revolution, which is crazy. I feel like it was a lot of people misreading the book. But, yeah.
So very typically, the Romantics were enthusiastic supporters of the ideals of the French Revolution. But Wordsworth, from whom we have those very words about the experience of the French Revolution, was also haunted for the rest of his life by nightmares of the terror, because Wordsworth lived in France in that very turbulent period. And this shift from an early enthusiasm for the French Revolution and then the disgust and shock at the terror is, I think, very indicative of a strand in Romanticism. And this relates not just to the French Revolution, but to the Enlightenment legacy more broadly.
Yeah.
So characteristically, the great Romantic thinkers, and in the British context I'm thinking particularly of S.T. Coleridge, to whom I'll come in a moment, these are figures who all knew the Enlightenment tradition. They had all become figures within it. The young S.T. Coleridge was an enthusiastic Unitarian. Unitarian was a classic form of Enlightenment Christianity. So the Romantics, characteristically, were figures, thinkers, who understood the force of the Enlightenment position, and their critique of Enlightenment thought was based on a deep sense of its power. So I think when we're looking at the Romantics, we have to bear in mind that they are not rejecting the Enlightenment critique tout court. What they are trying to do, at their best, is to retrieve what the Enlightenment legacy had occluded or obscured. And yet, very often, if you look at them more carefully, they are also prepared to concede a certain justification to those critiques in the Enlightenment. Classic example there would be Coleridge and his attitude to higher criticism. So Coleridge, on the one hand, accepts the Enlightenment critique of strict literalism. On the other hand, he insists that a Christian theologian has to understand Scripture as being divinely inspired in some sense, if not in terms of verbal inspiration. That is a typical Romantic move to want to retrieve what the Enlightenment, through its often rather savage critique, had seemed to have thrown away, and yet to do this with a certain degree of intellectual rigor and authenticity. In Britain, we tend to associate the great ages of thought with the 17th and 18th centuries, and then again with the 20th century. So the 19th century to us often seems like an age of poets or novelists, but not an age of great philosophers. And this is very misleading, I think, because figures like Coleridge were asking extremely profound questions. What is the basis of human society? Is it contract? Now, the Enlightenment answer to that question was indeed just that. Human society is based on contract. Well, the Romantics questioned that. And
that's
they,
kind of based.
in Coleridge's case, drawing on Burke, argued that contract presupposes much deeper
Edmund
bonds.
Burke.
You can only have a proper contract in society if there is already tacit agreement between the members of those society, and that those bonds are not conscious bonds. They are bonds between the dead, the unborn, and the living. So in this sense, in opposition to this purely contractual, individualistic, and atomistic model of society that was so prevalent in the Enlightenment, the Romantics were trying to draw on a more organic conception of society. We're trying to revisit the very idea of tradition. In fact, arguing, as Coleridge does, that change and progression in society will only function on the basis of tradition. It's only a society that is able to develop organically that is able to properly form serious contracts, and contracts that will sustain and be able to sustain proper agreement. So in the Romantic period, we find some fairly radical and searching criticisms of the Enlightenment legacy. Also in the scientific realm, the Romantics were very often worried about the limits of the new mechanical science. So figures like Coleridge didn't want to dispose of the scientific attitude towards the world. Coleridge himself had very close relations with leading scientists of the day. The question that Coleridge was raising was about the limits of mechanical explanation. Is it the case that, through purely mechanistic explanations, that we can do justice to
No.
our experience of, for example, human freedom?
We need a higher
Can
form
we do
of
justice
morality,
to our experience of
which comes from
beauty?
God.
How can we
Comes from the
understand the
book.
beauty of the world if we're just looking at the push and shove of mechanical items within that world? So the question that a great romantic thinker like Coleridge is posing is not the rejection of science, as it were, but rather a question about the proper limits of science. Can the natural sciences
That's pretty
explain
based.
everything that there
Nope.
is? Or are there domains of knowledge that are genuine knowledge and yet are not subject to the scrutiny of the laboratory? Are there areas where the techniques of the laboratory are simply inappropriate? Coleridge uses a nice image of someone who is sniffing a painting of Titian. And that image of the connoisseur trying to judge the painting of Titian by sniffing
By smelling it.
is an image of using the wrong criteria with which
That's
to
funny.
judge the world. And a great romantic thinker like Coleridge is arguing that the experimental
through
sciences
science, you
are, of
can't
course,
judge
enormously
morality.
important and enormously
Okay.
valuable in enhancing our understanding of the physical world. What they cannot offer is an exhaustive account of that reality. And for some aspects of our encounter with the world, we are in a much better position if we do not limit ourselves to the techniques of the heart of the natural sciences.
Huh. All right, that was. Yeah, so that's a lot of what Samuel Coleridge believed in. All right. Let's get back to my books here. All right, the next book. This is a really, really good book. It is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. This is a western, basically, that is about a character named the Kid. That's all that you know him by the name of until the last chapter. The last chapter is when he is grown up and he's called the Man. But we'll get into that in a little bit. The book goes through the Kid's life where he joins a gang called why can't I think of the name of the gang? Called the Glanton Gang, who are a bunch of people who go and scalp Native American savages, is what they called them. They would scalp their heads to get payment from the Mexican government for their scalps, because the Mexican government was paying people for their scalps. And in the book, the main antagonist is a man named the Judge, and the Judge is probably one of the weirdest and scariest antagonists you can probably think of. It's this giant man who is completely bald. He's 7 foot tall, completely bald, no skin, no eyebrows, no body hair at all, and he's albino. And he's just, he's a genius. He basically anything that you can think of, he knows about it. There's one scene in the book where they're running from the Indians, and he's sitting there, and he's gathering guano, like what's it called? Bat shit, basically. He's gathering guano, and they're sitting there, and he's not worried that they're getting chased by the Indians. And they get to the top of this hill, and he made gunpowder out of his own piss and guano, and then he lights it on fire and blows up the side of this hill and makes a rock slide down the hill, and it kills about all of them who are chasing after them. So that's just how smart he was. He's also just this evil person who, it alludes to it throughout the whole book that he rapes and kills children. Like, he carries around candy in his pocket to give to kids. And throughout the book, there's a bunch of kids that go missing and are found dead, like they were raped and killed. And then the end of the book is just so fucked up. The end of the book, it really, like, fucks with you how fucked up it is. So the end of the book, the kid grows up. He had left the Glanton gang, and he had become a better person, rejects fighting, rejects all this, and he goes into a bar. And in the bar is the judge. The judge is there, dressed in a suit, and he sits down, orders a drink, and he's drinking, and the judge walks up to him, and they have a conversation. And the judge tells him that they are there, like, it's destined for them to be there together. And the kid, now known as the man, argues that it's just coincidence. And the judge makes a philosophical argument about how nothing is coincidental, that there is a divine reason why everything happens. So then the kid is like, whatever, and he goes and he buys a prostitute. He goes and he has sex with the prostitute, does his thing, and then he leaves and he goes into the outhouse, and the judge is in the outhouse completely naked. And then it ends there. And then it goes to a scene where these men go into the outhouse, and one guy's like, no, don't come in. And then the other people come in and look at what is in the outhouse, and it is the man. The kid is dead in the outhouse and looked like he had been raped and murdered. And then the very end of the book is everybody is dancing inside the bar, and the judge is in the middle of the people dancing, and it says that he's huge, he doesn't have a shirt on, and he's dancing and he's wailing his arms around. And the end of the book goes like this. It says, he never sleeps. He says that he'll never die. He dances in the light and in the shadow. He is a great favorite. He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing. He says he'll never die. And that just gives you goosebumps, that the imagery of this man who's just this giant, hulking, like, almost like a alien-looking man because he's bald and albino, just dancing, flailing around. And I think that the judge is a representation of either Satan or just, like, evil in itself. Because of how much knowledge he has, I think that it does kind of relate to Satan. Because when you think of Satan, you think of a very smart trickster person. And then where was I going with this? But also in the book, what also makes this very weird is that throughout the book, the judge always calls fighting and violence the dance. So at the end of it, where it says he's always dancing, he'll never die, you know, that type of stuff, it makes it so that you think of, like, there's always going to be evil, there's always going to be fighting. Or another thing that I could think of is that he's like an inauguration of war, because during this time that it was written, I'm fairly sure that it was written during the Cold War. So I think that there was a lot of scare about war going on during that time. And I don't know if he meant to make it an amalgamation of that, but it definitely feels like it. It's a very weird book. I actually heard that they might be making a movie about it here soon. But they've been trying to make movies about this forever. Yeah. So yeah, so here we go.
So after 38 years and multiple failed attempts, Blood Meridian is finally getting adapted into a movie. So today,
Hopefully it's getting adapted into a movie, although I don't know if a movie can do it justice. It's such a weird book.
1985 Western novel by Cormac McCarthy is widely recognized as his magnum opus, despite also having written No Country for Old Men and The
That's
Road.
also
And the
a-
novel is just as dark and gritty as
Actually, I've never read No Country for Old Men, but I've read The Road, and The Road is really good, but I also really like the movie No Country for Old Men. It's directed by the Coen brothers, and it's a really good movie.
both of these novels combined, telling the story of a 14-year-old boy called the Kid in 1850s America, who falls in with a gang of bloodthirsty rangers operating on the US-Mexican border. And due to the extreme violence that occurs throughout the story, Blood Meridian quickly gained the reputation of being unfilmable, despite many of the scenes and characters being perfect for the big screen. And so, Tommy Lee Jones and later Ridley Scott both tried to develop movie adaptations of the book, but in each instance they hit exactly the same stumbling block, in that no studio was willing to take on a film as violent as Blood Meridian. So neither adaptation got very far, but in 2011 a third attempt was made by James Franco, who actually went on to shoot 25 minutes
That's
of test
crazy that
footage,
James Franco
starring
tried to
Scott
make
Glenn,
it. I
Mark
wonder if
Pellegrino,
we can
and Luke
find the
Perry.
test
This
footage.
later
That would be
materialized
cool.
into plans for a feature film that James Franco hoped to write and direct, which would have starred Russell Crowe, Ty Sheridan, and Vincent D'Onofrio. However, due to an issue with the film rights, the whole project ultimately fell apart, once again suggesting that the novel was simply unfilmable. However, in April this year, it was reported that New Regency would officially adapt Blood Meridian into a feature film, with John Hillcoat set to direct. And quite honestly, it's difficult to think of a better person for the role, as Hillcoat has already directed a McCarthy novel with The Road, as well
I
as
haven't
other big
watched The
hits
Road,
like
the
The
movie.
Proposition and Lawless. Not only that, but the 89-year-old Cormac McCarthy has also signed on to the
He
project
just
as an
died
executive
recently.
producer, practically guaranteeing that this adaptation will be faithful to the source material. However, the next big question mark would be around casting, given how many iconic...
So he just died. He died not that long ago. Cormac McCarthy's death. What the heck? Cormac McCarthy's death. No, not son. Why did it say son? Enter. Yeah, when did he die? June 13th of this year. Yeah, so I wonder if they're going to continue with making the movie.
characters appear throughout the book, such as the Kid and Judge, but unfortunately there's no casting news as of yet. Although, given that it's John Hillcoat directing, the odds are that longtime collaborator Guy Pearce will be a shoo-in for one of the main roles, having appeared in pretty much all of his previous films. However, that's all the details we really have for now, but in the meantime you might also...
Alright. Oh. But yeah, you guys should definitely read this book. This book is awesome. Well, the writing style is really weird too. It runs on, like, he doesn't use like parentheses in it, so it's kind of weird to read, you know? Like, see, like right here. I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't use parentheses. And there's a lot of things that people would probably consider run-on sentences in here that are... So it's just a really weird style of writing where he breaks like almost every single rule of writing in this book. Like the storytelling is very weird. Like stuff just happens. It feels like things just happen for no reason, but there is a deeper reason. It also feels like, you know, it's hard to explain. You just have to read the book. But it's definitely one of my favorite books. And it's just so dark too. There's parts in it where your gut just hurts from, like your gut, you just feel sick from the way he describes things and the violence that happens. But it's a really good book at the same time. All right, and now on to my next book. Notes from the Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This book is about a man who doesn't have a name. So he's just the man from the underground is what people call him. And the first part of the book is basically his journalings of his like personal philosophy, I would say. And then the second part of the book is 3 stories in his life when he was a younger kid that kind of influenced his life to become the man who wrote that philosophy. And the 3, I can't remember how it goes, exactly what the order is, but I think that the first one is about, I'm fairly sure the first one, let me see here, part 2. Oh, skipped it. Is about this young kid who was 24, and he's very shy and insecure, and on his way home from work, he always bumps into this like guard, and the guard never even knows who he is, recognizes him, doesn't give him the light of day ever. So he goes and buys a really nice coat. I think he even gets a loan for the coat so that the guard will recognize him or like acknowledge him. And he walks and bumps into the guard, and the guard still didn't acknowledge him. Who the fuck is this? Fat J? Is this you, JJ? Who are you, Fet J? Do I know you, or are you just some random person? But anyways, where was I? Got me all fucking distracted here. Anyways, he follow me, Fet J, and then maybe I'll think about it, though. Okay? I feel like this has to be one of my friends. I don't know who the fuck it is, though. Are you still there? You fucking weirdo? All right, but anyways, I'm gonna get on with this because whoever this is distracted me. Oh, where was I? The book, Notes from the Underground, is about a... Oh man, where was I? Oh, yeah. So he bought the coat and then bumped into the man, and the man still didn't acknowledge him or anything. And he writes about how that was worse than if the man even made fun of him because he didn't even feel acknowledged for being there. And one second. I'm gonna put the background music back on. And then the next part in there is about how he goes to meet up with some colleagues at it was like a wine bar basically, and they show up late, so he's already upset about that. And he ends up getting really drunk and kind of talking shit to them. And they end up making fun of him. And then they leave to go get some whores, I guess. And then he comes in and pays for a prostitute and ends up just talking to her and tells her that they should hang out later, and that's the end of that one. And then the next one in there is him her coming and meeting up with him, and she said that she did it out of spite. She did it not out of spite, but because she felt bad for him, basically. And then he gets really mad at that and yells at her and tells her that the only reason why he wants her there wanted her there was because he wanted to feel superior over her, and he told her that she was stupid and all this stuff, and then he started crying, and that is the end of the book. It's a really weird book, but right when I started reading it, like the first paragraph just hooked me and I couldn't set it down. And it starts off like this. It says, "I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man. I am a most unpleasant man. I think my liver is diseased. Then again, I don't know a thing about my illness. I'm not even sure what hurts. I'm not being treated and never have been. Although I respect both medicine and doctors, besides, I am extremely superstitious. Well, at least enough to respect medicine. I am sufficiently educated not to be superstitious, but I am anyways. No, gentlemen, it's out of spite that I don't wish to be treated. Now then, that's something you probably wouldn't understand. Well, I do. Of course, I won't really be able to explain to you precisely who will be hurt by my spite in this case. I know perfectly well that I can't possibly get even with doctors by refusing their treatment. I know better than anyone that all is going to hurt me alone, and no one else. Even so, I refuse to be treated. It's out of spite. My liver hurts. Good. Let it hurt even more." And I don't know why, but that first paragraph of this book just really, like, caught my attention and brought me in. I don't know. You kind of, at least I kind of related to this man, even though you probably shouldn't relate to that. I did. I kind of understood what he was saying, that he didn't want to go get treatment out of spite. I sometimes feel that way, so I kind of related with the character, even though I feel like you probably shouldn't relate with the character. Now, Fyodor Dostoevsky has a lot of books. This is the only one that I've read by him. I should read other ones. Like, he has Crime and Punishment, and all of them he really gets, from what I've heard, is that he really gets into the thoughts of his characters and writes how they feel and what they're thinking. And it's usually a very hurt person. So, I don't know. It's a good book. I'd suggest to read it. All right. Now that I finished that one, we can go on to the last book that's in here. Drum roll. Dad jokes. The good, the bad, and the terrible. This book is just so good. I don't know what to say about it, so I'll just read a few of them because all of the jokes are just perfect. They're just masterfully written. Here's one of them right here. I'm terrified of elevators. I'm not going to start taking steps to avoid them, though. See, really good. I don't know, I just couldn't think of another book to put in here for 10, so I just put this in here. It's one that I left on my toilet that I read for a while. I don't know. All right, that's all of the books right there. I would suggest you should go read all of them. I might play some Warhammer. Actually, I'll play a few games of Risk, and then we can watch some videos about these books. I think that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Hello? Why? Yeah, you're right. She just called me. Alright. Love you too. Bye.
The trio is back!
Better than ever, with so much more fun.
More mischief.
Primary motivational force in man. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, originally titled A Psychologist Experiences the Concentration Camp, was released in German in 1946, becoming one of the most influential books in the United States, having sold over 10 million copies at the time of Frankl's death in 1997, and continues to this day to inspire many to find significance in the very act of living. He sees the success of his book as a symptom of the mass neurosis of modern times, since the title promised to deal with the question of life's meaningfulness. Frankl's writings have been called the most important contributions in the field of psychotherapy since the days of Freud, Adler, and Jung. He is the founder of logotherapy, which he describes as a school of psychotherapy in spiritual terms, in which a search for meaning in life is the primary motivational force in man. Frankl chronicled his experiences as a prisoner in concentration camps during World War II Instead of giving up and accepting that he was doomed, as most did, he decided to use his suffering as an opportunity to help others and himself. While a man's destiny in life is certainly affected by the circumstances in which he finds himself, he is ultimately free to choose his attitude towards life. Part 1, Experiences in a Concentration Camp, constitutes Frankl's autobiographical account of his experiences in the concentration camps, while Part 2, Logotherapy in a Nutshell, introduces his theory of logotherapy. Frankl begins by telling the reader that this book is a compilation of his experiences and observations. He focuses on how the daily struggles of camp life affected the mental state of his fellow inmates. There are 3 psychological stages experienced by the prisoners: shock during the first few days in the camp, apathy after being accustomed to camp existence, and depersonalization, leading to bitterness and disillusionment with life after being liberated. Many experience the phenomenon known as delusion of reprieve. A man sentenced to death becomes convinced that he might be set free just before his execution. The prisoners were made to pass in front of a guard who pointed them to the right or to the left. About 90% were sent to the left for execution. The remaining few were sent to the right, including Frankl. They then had all their possessions removed, being left with nothing but their own naked existence. The second psychological stage of the prisoner is apathy, the blunting of the emotions and the feeling that one could not care anymore. Frankl writes that there is much truth in Dostoevsky's definition of man.
Thug notes.
His name was Cain. He had a horse along.
What it do, player? This week on Thug Notes, we digging deep with Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This book's nameless narrator say he one sick motherfucker, but he ain't got the clap or anything like that. The only thing wrong with this fool is he's decked out with too much consciousness. And cause of that, this fool is
no, we haven't spooned. Who is this?
About man, freedom, rationality, and other real talk. Our 40-year-old recluse started reminiscing about some shit that went down when he was in his 20s. Back in the day, the underground man decided to drop in on some old school homie named Zverkov, who about to throw a banging party. Thing is,
I guess you could if we do.
Zverkov's crew no more. In fact, when they see him lurking around the party, sipping too much scissor and acting a fool, they start thinking, what's this fool smoking? They even try to shake him before bringing their sausage fest to the local Poon Palace. But the narrator steps to these haters and tells them there anyway. The philosophizing about man, freedom, rationality, and other real talk, our 40-year-old recluse started reminiscing about some shit that went down when he was in his 20s. Back in the day, the underground man decided to drop in on some old school homie named Zverkov, who about to throw a banging party. Thing is, old Undy ain't tight with
I like how they have 40s.
Crew no more. In fact, when they see him lurking around the party, sipping too much scissor and acting a fool, they start thinking, what's this fool smoking? They even try to shake him before bringing their sausage fest to the local Poon Palace. But the narrator steps to these haters and tells them there anyway. When he arrives, he peeps some rank-looking hoe named Lisa, takes her to a room, and shows her his Russian czar. Know what I'm saying? Now, after doing the nasty, he tried to convince Lisa not to be turning tricks no more by getting all up in her head and messing with her heart. Later, when the underground man kicking it back at his spot, Lisa rolls in all unannounced. She want to talk real with him, but all he want to do is get uppity and preach to her. But eventually, this fool can't keep his together and starts weeping.
I already finished talking about all my top favorite books, and now I'm just kind of watching videos explaining them.
He decides he's gonna toss her a couple dollar bills to prove that all that real talk was bullshit and that she ain't nothing but a dirty skank. But Lisa shows this fool who really got class and tosses that paper before she leaves. Realizing he acting a serious fool, he runs after Lisa to beg forgiveness, but she long gone. This book right here is widely considered the world's first existentialist novel.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that when I was talking about it.
Dostoevsky was keeping it OG with the creation of the underground man. Ever since the Under G hit the scene in 1864, righteous players been using the term underground to spit in the face of the establishment and give all traditional forms of thought a big f*** you. Cause the underground man don't think like the rest of society. Everybody else is just f***ing their way through life and never asking the big questions. But for our boy, that's the dank. And if that's the way you wanna roll, you gotta open up your eyes so wide to the world around you that it hurts. If you can do that, you playing a whole other game, B. That pain you feel when you beefing with reality and get your wrecked creates consciousness. Like our boys say, suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. But barking with the big dogs comes at a cost, hyper-consciousness. When you can see every angle to a question, you can get so overwhelmed that you don't know whether to go left or right. So instead of choosing a direction, our man doesn't do a damn thing. An intelligent man cannot become anything seriously, and it is only the fool who becomes anything. It ain't that this fool lazy, it ain't even that. Hyper-consciousness has made this cat straight up nothing. Our boy calls this conscious inertia. The real joke up in here is that consciousness only comes from the suffering you experience when trying to connect with other peeps. But when the big C comes creeping through your town, connecting with others becomes damn near impossible. There's the rub, blood. And if that seems like a whack paradox to you, it's all good, because the underground man is a living, breathing paradox. Our unreliable narrator said he loved to be isolated, yet he jonesing for human contact. He envies your everyday player, but he also proud not to be one. He suffers, yet he finds pleasure in it. All this mess making him so out of touch with society that lies and dreams are all he got. For we are all divorced from life. We are all cripples, every one of us, more or less. We are so divorced from it that we feel at once a sort of loathing for real life, and so cannot bear to be reminded of it. While we have come almost to looking upon real life as an effort, almost as hard work, and we are all privately agreed that it's better in books. So escape this life, dive into a good book, and hit me up next week, homies. Peace.
You're going to have to get used to asking questions that might make you a little bit uncomfortable.
Himself, as he's never Hello everyone, and welcome to the 116th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring the long-awaited and oft-requested Judge Holden from Blood Meridian. Judge Holden is one of the most vile and reprehensible characters ever created, and his actions within this tale mirror that designation, and that's quite notable considering this is a story that is filled to the brim with evil. And though we're going to touch on the judge's actions, what we're primarily going to be concerning ourselves with in this video is who, or what, Judge Holden is, and what he's meant to represent. And I believe with the ample amount of detail we're given about this man and his views throughout this story, we can come as close as we can to answering these questions without input from Cormac McCarthy himself, as he's never explained too much about this story or what exactly the judge is meant to represent. With that in mind, this video is my interpretation of his character, and mine could be very different from yours. So don't take what I say here as an absolute, but rather as an avenue for discourse that you can use to express your own thoughts on the judge down below, as this mysterious tome and its messages and meanings is definitely one that should be debated on. Now, if any of you have seen my video on Morgoth or Ingsoc, you'll know that I used a substantial amount of text from the books they're featured in order to support my analysis of them, and I'm going to be doing the same here, as without a visual representation, I feel that it's much more difficult for me to get my point across, considering it would require you to leaf through the book in order to refresh yourself on certain things. With visual media, that isn't so much of a problem, because I usually place clips of the source material in these videos, and even if that isn't enough, recalling what happened in a film, or even looking up a scene, is much easier than reading through several passages of a book mid-video. So with that in mind, yes, a large part of this video is made up of me reading text from the novel, as well as another source, and I'm not trying to artificially inflate this video's runtime by doing so. Rather, I believe it's an essential component of an analysis of a primarily literary character, and it's often the case that the text speaks for itself, and I'm only here to guide you towards what I believe to be its intended meaning. Also, I will be altering the text a tad in some places to make it more understandable in spoken word form. For example, example, McCarthy often doesn't say he said or she said after a character has finished speaking, so he can immerse the reader more in his tale. However, that can be a little messy when you're listening to it, so I'll be using those phrases when applicable, even if you can't find them in the book. Similarly, all uses of the N-word that can be found in the text that I'm talking with have been replaced with the words black man, so keep that in mind as well. Also, I won't be mentioning the real Judge Holden in this video, as the real version of him is more of an inspiration than anything.
Oh, I didn't know that
the
real judge that there was a
There's
real
another
Judge
note
Holden.
I needed to add in here after I started editing this video. As you saw on screen at the beginning of the video, there aren't that many depictions of the judge out there, and I really noticed that when I started editing. So, instead of throwing random nonsense images at you for the sake of variety, during the upcoming portion of this video where I'm narrating two of the judge's stories, you'll be seeing this looping video of a campfire. I know, that's pretty boring, but since the judge told these stories around a campfire, I figured at least you could imagine yourself sitting around that very same fire while I told his stories. There will be more variation image-wise in this video once I finish telling these stories, but again, don't expect anything too fancy, and I would definitely turn on the subtitles if I were you. Now without further ado, let's begin. In these videos, I often start with the character's background, or at the very least, their appearance, but I believe it is in our best interest here to first examine the philosophy and beliefs espoused by Judge Holden that can be gleaned from his speeches and stories. And we'll start with one such story that the judge tells his companions after he's been questioned by a man named Webster about the ledger that he habitually draws in. In the western country of the Alleghenies,
Mondays are the best.
I think that this is about who the real Judge Holden is.
Because members get a...
Judge Holden is an evil, evil man. Within the 1985 Cormac McCarthy novel Blood Meridian, or The Evening Redness in the West, he is a complicated and otherworldly figure. At times, he acts as an ally to the main character, known only to the reader as the Kid. At other instances, Judge Holden is a vicious adversary, but always he is a terrifying, unyielding force of nature, and he's just absolute evil. He has his own goals, which feel almost entirely unknowable to McCarthy's reader. The judge possesses strange abilities that appear to be mystical, seemingly controlling the weather, not needing to eat or sleep, and appearing out of nowhere like a spirit. But he was also reportedly a real man. So, who was Judge Holden in Cormac McCarthy's imagination? And who was he in real life, if he existed at all? I'm Dan. You had to know the Lit Bro video was coming at some point. Infinite Jest, Philip Roth, Confederacy of Dunces, they've been right there the whole time.
And I'm Jake, and we're both public high school teachers. Blood Meridian is a difficult book. It's written almost like scripture, without quotation marks for character speech, and with long descriptive passages. It has digressions in the plot, which the meaning is very elusive, and it's incredibly violent and racist. For that reason, it's almost difficult to recommend, despite extremely compelling characters. The characters and luxurious prose are really what have to carry the novel here, because it's light on overarching plot. The Glanton Gang, a group of bounty hunters in northern Mexico based on the real-life gang of scalp hunters led by John Joel Glanton, go from place to place, causing havoc, killing people, and drinking whiskey. It almost reads like a hyper-violent Western update to the picaresque genre. Figures wandering the frontier with a fairly episodic structure. We're definitely not experts on Blood Meridian, and this is all based on our own reading of the book, so please, throw your 2 cents down in the comments. Fight it out down there. We'd love to have that discussion.
In the novel, the judge accompanies the scalp-hunting Glanton Gang at the U.S.-Mexico border, riding in second command to Glanton. They're being paid for scalps, proof of their kills, by the government. Specifically, they're looking for a man named Chief Gomez. So much about the character of Judge Holden is just realistic enough that he seems like he could pass as a normal person, but so much else about the judge is just supernatural enough to make your spine tingle. He speaks in sermons and parables. He's unnaturally tall, completely hairless, and pale. He speaks multiple languages, knows textbooks worth of information on every topic that comes up, and he's a skilled musician and frontiersman. He's unnaturally strong, but doesn't seem to need to eat or sleep. He seems to know things he couldn't possibly know. Children disappear when he's around. He is always out of reach of the laws of men, and pretty much inescapable. He reveres war, violence, and destruction, while also speaking of order and law and government when it furnishes his ends.
The judge is introduced early in the novel in a town called Nacogdoches, Texas, in which he intrudes on a religious revival service. And
I forgot to talk about this part in there. The first time that you see the judge, he basically just starts a shootout in a church. He goes in there and he says that the preacher raped a kid. So then naturally people get mad at the preacher, and then they kill the preacher, and then he was like, nah, that was just a joke.
The accusation that the preacher there is not only an imposter who knows not a word of scripture, but is a wanted pedo and a goat rapist. The crowd attacks the preacher. Later, when asked by a man how the judge knew all that about the preacher's past, the judge says that he's never seen the man before in his life, insinuating that he's made it all up. The men laugh.
When the Glanton gang comes across the judge, told to the kid in chapter 10, they just found him, sitting on a rock in the middle of the desert, as calm as though he were waiting for a coach. He didn't have water with him, and Tobin, the gang member recalling the meeting, seems bewildered as to how he could have got there, not really believing the judge's story. And there he sat, no horse, just him and his legs crossed, smiling as we rode up, like he'd been expecting us. I think he had been expecting you, Tobin. Not to mention that apparently everyone in the gang claims to have encountered the judge at some point before, just like the kid in Nacogdoches.
Even stranger, later in that chapter, the judge creates gunpowder out of seemingly nowhere. Chased by Apache warriors, completely out of gunpowder, the judge tells the men to travel around the mountain they're on, like Joshua marching around Jericho. And when they return to the judge, he's made an oven out of clay and is combining elements, using brimstone from the mountain, molding it, and then urinating on it. The judge makes a devil's batter, which the book calls a matrix, to dry out and use as gunpowder, killing every last one of their pursuers. This is where the judge seems to be at his most supernatural, using brimstone of all things and almost doing alchemy. A cloud heading straight towards the sun to cover it, thus not allowing the matrix to dry quick enough, but the cloud miraculously misses the sun. Did we mention the judge is completely naked this entire scene?
In one of the creepiest exchanges in the novel, the judge draws in a notebook he keeps with him at all times. When a man named Marcus asks why the judge records so much of what he sees, the judge says that it was his intention to expunge them from the memory of man, that everything will be recorded in one book or another, that every man is tabernacled in every other, and he in exchange, and so on, in an endless complexity of being and witness to the uttermost edge of the world.
Are you Zillowing your friend's house to see what it cost them?
I wasn't.
The startled Marcus begs the judge not to draw him in his ledger, and the judge then tells a parable about fatherhood, which has been pretty well covered. The ledger comes up a few chapters later when Toadvine asks what the judge's purpose in it is, and the judge utters one of the book's most famous lines. He folded the ledger shut and laid it on one side, and pressed his hands together and passed them down over his nose and mouth and placed them palm down on his knees. Whatever exists, he said, whatever in creation exists without my knowledge, exists without my consent.
In chapter 17, the judge reveals his love and admiration for war in an exchange with gang member John Jackson. The good book says that he lives by the sword, the shall perish by the sword, said Jackson. The judge smiled, his face shining with grease. What right man would have it any other way, he said. The good book does indeed count war and evil, said Irving. Yet there's many a bloody tale of war inside of it. It makes no difference what...
Yeah, no, this part I forgot to mention how much the judge talks about war. I forgot to mention that in there, that he is always like relating everything back to war.
But men think of war, said the judge. War endures. As well ask men what they think of stone. War was always here. Before man was, war waited for him. The ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. That is the way it was and will be. After the Glanton gang is killed at Yuma Crossing, notably with Captain Glanton getting his head split in half with an axe, Toadvine, the ex-priest Tobin, and the kid are all now in conflict with the judge, who it seems wants to betray and kill them all. As they run from the judge in the desert, the judge, draped in another man's clothing, is always visible in pursuit of them.
And he has this guy named
After a time, the kid is arrested, awakening in a jail to find the judge, clad in a new suit and freshly polished boots, to be looking in at him. The judge tells the kid that all the deaths of the Glanton gang were his fault, and repeatedly tries to get the kid to do his bidding, to admit to being the responsible party, to come over to him in the cell, to stand in the light. Each time, the kid refuses, suggesting that the kid is not under the power of the judge, unlike so many men. Many years on, the kid, having never joined another outlaw group, but continuing to live violently, arrives at a tavern and happens across the judge. The judge is watching him, seeming to know he would be there. In his conversation with the kid, who still wants nothing to do with the judge, Holden tells him that there is a strict order to things, and that if a man, for example, ends up in a tavern without his own reason, it is by the reasoning of another. He kills the kid in an outhouse, and in a cultish, naked ceremony back in the tavern, the judge plays fiddle as the book closes, dancing and fiddling at once. His feet are light and nimble. He never sleeps.
That's also a thing that I think where he's relating it back to the devil, because he's playing the fiddle, which I feel like is related, like a lot of people relate that to the devil, you know?
Die. He dances in light and in shadow and is a great favorite. He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing, dancing. He says that he will never die. I got goosebumps just reading that. If you ask us, and hey, you did click on this video, the character of Judge Holden is not any specific pre-existing thing. He doesn't fit into a recognizable category with lore or rules like demons or ghosts or something. You can describe him, but you can never exactly categorize him. He's a harbinger of violence, an admirer of war, an unsettling presence, but he's totally unique in literature. The Vile Eye, with his excellent series Analyzing Evil, thinks the judge is Satan himself. And while I love his argument, I don't think it's that simple. The judge's violence and reverence for war makes us think that he might be some kind of god or embodiment of war. The book strongly implies that the judge is immortal and will always be, the same way that the judge talks about how war will always be. But McCarthy is so hard to pin down and so evasive in his meanings that we don't believe it was meant to be, for example, Satan or a specific
I think
type
that it
of
was
demon
meant to be Satan.
Based on the book's epilogue, as well as some of the other chapters, the judge could represent the basest instincts of mankind, to want to be led by an authority figure and be influenced, which is why the kid is so interesting to the judge. He can't control the kid. But we're not sure. In chapter 22, the kid is repeatedly visited by the judge in his dreams, delivering the line which I think is the most telling of the judge's origins. Whatever his antecedents, he was something wholly other than their sum, nor was there system by which to divide him back into his origins, for he would not go. The judge is something unknowable, outside the jurisdiction of man.
It's my job to be aggressive, but only when I'm on the football field. Off the field, I stay calm and collected. It's really important when I'm driving. Follow the speed limit, give plenty of braking distance, and use your turn signals, even out here.
Fuck.
What? No! Wait! We can't stop here. This is Bat Country.
20 years ago, a
That
new
part's
generation
fucking
was
funny.
introduced to Hunter S. Thompson's crowning jewel of gonzo journalism, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a savage journey to the heart of the American dream.
Fear and Loathing was originally published in 1971.
You know what? I think I'm going to end the stream right here. I'm done. I finished what I wanted to do. I'm losing this game. I'm just going to finish it right here. All right. But yeah, so that was my top 10 books. Notes from the Underground. That's number 1, but I'll go from number 10, I guess number 9 to number 1. Wolf of Wall Street. This one's just really fun to read. Nothing really too deep about it. It's just a fun read. There's a lot more in this book than what's in the movie. Yeah, it's just really good writing too, which is surprising because it was his first book that he ever wrote. Then number 2, Man's Search for Meaning. This one was really good, by Viktor Frankl. It's about a Jew in the Holocaust. And then the way that he figured out how to find meaning while going through that much suffering. Number 8. Number 7 is Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception. This is just about I already said what it's all about, but this is just about him having what the fuck? This is just about him doing mescaline and his experience. Paradise Lost by John Milton is my number 6. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, number 5. Rime of the Ancient Mariner, that's number 4. Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, that's number 3. Blood Meridian, number 2. Notes from the Underground, number 1. Alright, I will see you guys on Monday. Deuces.